Saline City Council meeting order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have an agenda in front of us. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Actually, what I'd like to do after citizen comments under unfinished business, have a little bit of discussion on Saturday, because we didn't really have a chance to discuss the two candidates, so we have some direction on the motion since, so I don't necessarily think we need to change the agenda, but I will probably be asking for some discussion before we actually have a motion.
Okay.
So do we have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
So moved. Second.
Move Morrow, second Kirba. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no absences tonight. Citizen comment on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on the items that appear on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Is there anyone that would like to speak on this item on the agenda?
I had the opportunity to sit through the interviews and was very impressed with the candidates. But I do, at this point, want to make sure we thank Mike Linden for his service, because he was terrific during a very turbulent time for our police department and a lot of things going on last year. I think Mike Linden definitely has my appreciation and the city's appreciation for doing a wonderful job as an interim chief.
Thank you. Are there any other citizen comments? Okay, so after we had our, we had two excellent candidates come forward on Saturday, and we had a work session or a special interview process, and then we opened it up for community feedback, and also the police department had an opportunity to meet the two candidates, and I think we got some feedback from that. So at this point, I think we probably just need to have some discussion so we have a sense of what the council's thoughts are regarding this. So does anybody have any comments or?
Are we to speak about the candidate that we prefer, or?
Well, since we don't really have a motion for one person or the other,
Yeah.
I think I don't really see the point in making a motion. And then I thought maybe because we didn't have discussion after we interviewed the two gentlemen, because we were expecting community input and police input to that. So I thought we would, evaluate it based on that input also, so we had a more collaborative process. So that's really why we didn't talk about, the pros and cons to each candidate at the last meeting. So I would suggest that this would be the time before we actually do a motion that identifies the person, that we sort of have a chance to build some consensus here so we don't struggle through a motion. So I think, so Mr. Morrow.
Well, unless Mr. Rhodes would like to. Okay, right. Well, let me begin by saying how much of an honor it was to serve on the hiring task force and to serve with our city manager, Mayor Driscoll, Councilmember Rhodes, Carrie from Career Solutions. You've been great. Appreciate it. And I also really want to thank Ed Toth, our the chief of police from Chelsea, for serving on that task force and providing us with his insights and his perspectives. I want to say that both of the finalists, in my opinion, are accomplished individuals, men of the utmost integrity, and I think that both would probably do a more than adequate job leading the Saline Police Department. That, however, does not mean I don't have a strong opinion. In fact, I have a pretty strong opinion on who should be the next police chief. And I believe beyond a reasonable doubt that Larry Rennick should be the next chief of police for the city of Saline. I observed in Larry qualities, admirable, redeeming qualities that I think would serve him well in Saline. He has a quiet gentleness, but he can also be firm and emphatic. I liked what he said about relationship building. I especially liked what he said about mentoring, that it's a great testimony, a great testament, excuse me, to being a leader, to mentoring and grooming people to one day take over your position and assume your role. And Larry is the only individual, the only finalist with a proven track record of successfully integrating himself into a new community, which he did in Davison Township. So for those reasons and for a variety of others, I will be supporting Larry Rennick to be the next chief of police for the city of Saline.
Is there anybody else that has comments? Mr. Rhodes?
As Councilmember Marl indicated, I also served on that committee, and so I had the benefit of interacting twice with both of those gentlemen, and having more interaction with them. And I believe, as Councilmember Marl said, both of them are very technically competent, and either one would make an excellent chief of police. But I do believe that Mr. Rennick has a personality that our citizenry would be more comfortable with, perhaps more able to relate to. He's the other gentleman, one of the concerns that I had is that his visage might be just a little too militaristic still sometimes, and some of the individuals within our community might be less than open with him and reluctant to come forward and make comments about their concerns about the police department. I think either one would do an excellent job of representing the individuals within the police department, while at the same time paying attention and being knowledgeable of the limitations that the city has as far as budgeting and staffing for that department. We have a great police department. I'm really happy with them and with how they all work together and how they look out for the community. And I just, my feeling was after those two interviews that Mr. Rennick would be the one who would best fit the culture that we have here in Saline. Thank you.
Is there any other feedback? Mr. Hart?
Yes, I was also impressed with both candidates, and like Mr. Marl and Mr. Rhodes, my preference is for Mr. Rennick. I appreciated there were several of the answers that he gave where he expressed views and approaches to leadership that I think would fit well in Saline. When he talked about priorities for his first 6 months on the job, the first thing he talked about was looking around and seeing the community and the department and how things work, and then talked about some of the specific areas that would be focuses of his policies and personnel in the department. But I appreciated the fact that his approach would be one not to just come racing in with an agenda to complete, but that he would look around and get more acquainted with the community. I also appreciated his approach to relationship building within the community, or what he described as what his approach would be. Mr. Northrup, on the other hand, also I felt had many good qualities, and the thing that I was most impressed with of the many good things that he had to say were his comments about dealing with difficult budgets, particularly his approach to including staff in difficult budget processes. But nevertheless, my preference would be for Mr. Rennick.
Mr. Peter?
Boy, after talking to both candidates, it was almost a dead heat for me. When it comes to talent and competency, I think both are equal. So it may come down to an intangible for myself, and that is if I had a problem, had to knock on a door and go in and talk to the man, I think that Larry Rennick I'd be a little more comfortable with that situation. So hopefully others feel like that too, and I agree with what's been said here tonight.
Mr. Gearbach?
My response is basically similar to what the rest of council is saying, is that I thought both candidates were more than qualified for the position. As in terms of whether one's better over the other, I looked more towards the experiences of what some of those candidates have faced, and looking at the one, Mr. Rennick, he's faced a little more issues from the Flint area and those type of aspects which potentially are facing our community. I see that as more of an exposure to what potentially may happen as we become more of a growing community, which we know is going to happen. I also am looking at towards the difference between where each one has come from and their backgrounds and such. I know there's been assessments of basically how you look at Mr. Rennick from his perspective of, he's been in education, he's background, he has some leadership skill sets and understandings of what has happened in the past, and basically seen some different viewpoints and things, even from his personal training and education and participation in committees and boards that he's been a part of. From that perspective, I'm looking at someone that has a little more breadth and depth of larger area of understanding, namely Davison in that area. Sturgis, although I'm sure is a good community, it's reducing in its size, and I'm not sure what it's really faced in terms of some of the complications and things that we're looking at being so close to a major city that's sprawling out towards us. So I'm looking towards someone that really has had that experience, and I think that's Mr. Rennick.
Mr. Rhodes, do you? Roth, sorry.
Okay. I want to thank Terry and Research Committee, all the committees that interviewed the candidates, and they brought us a dead heat. And I certainly appreciate the questions that Terry asked to both of the candidates as final questions. They were very appropriate, and I really don't know how to accept those answers from the two. It just wasn't enough to separate the two. So I see them pretty much as a dead heat at this point in time. I agree with all my colleagues on the council as far as the good points that they pointed out in the candidates. And in questioning and researching, I think that probably Larry Rennick would be the better of the two at this point in time. That I would hope that we don't have to go through the search very in the near future. So I really feel both candidates would definitely help us out.
Okay, I would agree with the rest of the council that I think that Mr. Rennick has a more breadth and depth of experience, so I also believe that he would be the best candidate at this point in time. They were both excellent candidates. I also want to say thank you to Terry, the task force. Todd spent a lot of time organizing this, getting the community input, the police input. It's been a long process, and I think a very thorough one. And there was a lot of applicants that were highly qualified, but the last two candidates were by far and away the best candidates. So we were very fortunate, I think, to have both of them apply to Saline for the position. So does anybody have a motion that they would like to make?
I'm happy and honored to make a motion to offer employment for the position of police chief to Larry Rennick, condition upon satisfactory completion of the background investigation, physical and drug screen, and to direct city manager to negotiate an employment contract with, are we just inserting his name again?
Yeah.
Larry Rennick? Okay.
Support.
So we have a motion by Mr. Morrow, a second by Mr. Rhodes. Do we have discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under the Open Meeting Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Glenn Law, 521 Canterbury Drive. I just want to thank the council for making the decision. It was not an easy decision, I'm sure. I met the candidates briefly during the interview process on Saturday, and certainly I think the city was confronted with a win-win situation. I think both candidates were measured up very well, and I don't think you could have made a poor choice. I think either man would have stood out and served the city well. So I thank you for taking the time to do the diligence that you had to do to fill this important position.
Thanks. Is there any other public comment? If not, we have a motion to adjourn it. Oh, sorry. Diane's reminding me. So we talked about having a joint meeting with the Planning Commission to talk about the form-based code, and we have 4 dates. Monday, July 16th or 30th, or Wednesday, July 11th, which I think I'm just getting back in town then, so we, July 16th, 30th, or 25th. First two are Mondays, the third one is a Wednesday. And maybe we could have Justine do the meet-o-matic thing or something.
Meeting wizard?
Well, there's all sorts of different tools. I can't remember what the latest one is we use, but,
Doodle?
what?
Doodle?
Or Doodle is what I've been using lately. Sorry.
My preference would be to do it sooner as opposed to later.
Okay, well, we'll aim for the 16th, but I think, Todd, if you wouldn't mind asking Justine to put those 3 dates out. I can double check on the 11th. I think I'm getting back that day from being gone, so. Okay. So is there any other items to add to the agenda for tonight's meeting? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn at 7:50?
So moved.
Second.
Move Morrow?
Yes.
Second Gearba. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.